I get questions about surf fishing gear all the time, and I wanted to put together a video that covers all of it. Everything that you will need to catch fish in the surf. This isn't going to include shark fishing. That's a whole separate thing, and I'll make a different video for that. But it should cover everything but sharks. We're going to go over rods, reels, line, rigs, hooks, weights, and bait. So everything you need to get geared up and get out there and fish in the surf. So first, let's go over reels. I have fished these carbon body reels, and I have moved on to full metal reels, which is basically just pens, because I have had these reels. Basically, the way I describe it is they've given up on me. I think because my reels as a surf fishing guide see 60 hours of sun a week. They're carbon, but really they're plastic. The plastic reels don't last as long as the full metal bodies. That's just something that I've experienced. I still recommend a carbon reel for inshore fishing if you're going to be casting lures all day long, or even if you're fishing in the surf with lures. I would gear up with something like this is a Daiwa Ballistic. I also have a BGMQ up there. Those Daiwa reels, the Shimano Vanford is also a really nice reel. Those reels are great for casting lures. I don't recommend those reels for set rig fishing though. So let's get into the reels that I use. The number one reel that I will recommend to people is the Penn Battle. This is a Penn Battle DX in the 4000 series. I have it spooled up with 20-pound braid. These are great little reels. You can see they take abuse sitting in my sand spikes. But I have recently really been moving towards more expensive reel, the Spin Fishers, just because my gear takes such abuse, and the Spin Fishers I think are going to hold up a little better for me over time because they have a better ceiling in them than the Penn Battle. But for people who are going to be surf fishing a handful of times a month, not 6 times a week, I would recommend the Penn Battle as the reel of choice. Just from a price point perspective, you can get 2 Penn Battles for every Spin Fisher. So this Penn Battle in the 4000 series would be my suggestion as just the all-around go-to surf fishing reel. Now, if you did want to upgrade to a nicer reel, the Spin Fisher in a 4500 is what I would recommend. Again, spooling that with 20-pound braid. As I mentioned, I have been upgrading to the Penn Spin Fisher. This is a 4500 live liner. Again, just 20-pound braid on there. The reason for the 20-pound braid is castability. I like the option of being able to cast really far. The Spin Fisher does have a IPX5 sealing on it, which means those internals are fully sealed and protected from splashing. When you're out there casting, you'll catch a wave to the chest and your gear will get very wet. So I did upgrade to the Spin Fisher, one for that feature, but also because it comes with live liners. When you're fishing in the surf, you have to fish with light drag when your rod is in the rod holder. That's because you never know when something really big is going to come pick up your bait, like a big stingray or a shark. And the live liner has been great for me because I fish with a lot of very inexperienced clients, and having to coach them through tightening down the drag after they've picked up the rod was cumbersome, I guess is a way of putting it. So having the live liner feature on this, where I can preset the fight drag and then just have it be very light drag in the rod holder, has been a lifesaver for me, actually. So that's why I use the live liners you as an experienced fisherman probably don't need the live lining ability. And it's just one other component that's potentially going to go bad. So I actually suggest not buying this and buying one that doesn't have that feature. But I like it for my purposes as a guide. There is one brand of reel that I highly recommend staying away from, and that's KastKing. This is a KastKing Sharky. These reels have a ton of flex in this arm right here. They also aren't sealed at all. This is essentially, they advertise it as a saltwater reel, but it's just a freshwater reel. And it's going to get sand and salt inside in the internals. I bought them because they put out a ton of drag, but then when you actually apply a ton of drag to a fish, you can't reel it because it's flexing so much, which is just a terrible experience for everybody involved, and it's kind of embarrassing as a guide. So I highly recommend staying away from KastKing. They do now make sealed reels, but they're incredibly heavy. They're way heavier than the Penns. Stay away from KastKing. If you like put saltwater reels into Amazon, KastKing will pop up. Don't buy it. Buy a Penn, even buy a Daiwa or a Shimano or an Akuma. Don't buy KastKing. All right, let's talk surf fishing rods for a minute. The rod that you use in the surf is going to be the most important piece of the puzzle for you as you are putting together your setups. There are three main things that you need to consider when looking at the rod, and that is that it has a soft tip. You need a soft tip to be able to see the little strikes and when your bait is getting stolen. The second is what the insert is in the rings. That is this piece of the rod in here. What is that made of? And then the third is what the guide is made of. The material here. The material of the actual rod isn't actually super important, in my opinion. You could pay for a really, high ton graphite rod, but that's going to be a fragile rod. I actually prefer carbon rods because they aren't as fragile. But a fiberglass rod, like an ugly stick rod, is going to be really heavy. And so I'm of the opinion that you should pay a little extra to get out of the ugly stick stuff and up into like an Akuma like this. This is an Akuma SST. This is actually a steelhead rod. It is a really lightweight rod, which has a very, very soft tip. It is easy for me to do what's called holding bottom with this, which is a very important part of surf fishing, where basically you're keeping your line tight against your weight. And that's because that tip will bend with the waves and not pull the weight up out of the sand. Instead, the rod tip will bend, and that allows you to hold bottom out there in the surf. And that because that's bending and holding bottom, you can then see the little fish coming and tapping your bait. So this is a rod that I highly recommend. I will have links to most of the gear, not all of the gear that we talk about, down below in this video if you want to buy any of it. But this Akuma SST is a great rod for targeting the little things in the surf. When I'm running shrimp, I run shrimp on size 4 circle hooks. We'll get to hooks later. But we're targeting pompano and whiting and even bluefish, and the little things that are there. Most of it that you're going to catch is kind of in the range of 10 to 18 inches. You might pick up I've caught like 24, 25 inch redfish on this little setup, and that's a fun fight. I've caught a monster pompano on this setup, and again, that was a really fun fight on this lighter setup. This setup right here is my recommendation for an all-around surf fishing setup. This is an Akuma Rockaway 10-foot medium with the Penn Spin Fisher 4500. You could also run the Penn Battle 4000 on this. That's what I was doing before I upgraded to the Spin Fishers. I've landed literally hundreds of fine tooth sharks on this in the kind of 4 to 4.5 foot range. They put up a fun fight on gear like this, but the tip of this rod is also sensitive enough to see a 8-inch whiting come and smack it. So you could use this setup for almost all fish in the surf. Now, actually, just this week, we hooked into like a 80 to 90 pound tarpon on this setup, and we were underpowered. That tarpon, we fought it for like 15 minutes, but at some point, or at the end of the fight, it decided it was just swimming back out to sea, and there was no stopping it. It pulled off probably 200 yards of line. I had the drag all the way locked down, and it was still pulling, and it eventually just broke us off because I was, getting to the point where I needed to thumb the reel to put some more pressure on that fish because it was just taking off. So, I've been overpowered probably twice with this setup. There was another time where I don't know what kind of fish it was, but it was the same thing. It just took off and went, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. So you will occasionally get overpowered with this setup fishing in the surf. But that's, something that I'm willing to do, because if you only fish really heavy gear, that little stuff isn't very fun. I had a 26-inch Spanish on this the other day, and that was a fun fight on this setup. On a really heavy, I have a heavy 12-foot with a 8500 series reel up there, which isn't going to be fun. Like you're just going to crank that fish in and not really feel it. This is a great all-around setup. Know that you will very rarely get outpowered on this setup by something really big in the surf. But for the most part, this will land almost all of the fish that are there in the surf. And it is a light enough setup that it's still fun to reel in the, 15 to 20 inch fish. Those fish still will put up a fight on this setup. So this is the one that I recommend as kind of the all-around setup. Either a Penn Battle or a Penn Spin Fisher paired with the Okuma Rockaway 10-foot medium. So let's talk about the 3 things to consider when buying a surf fishing rod, and that is 1, that it has a sensitive tip, 2, the material that the ring insert is made of, and 3, the material that the guide is made out of. Again, you want a sensitive tip so that you can see the little things hitting it. The material that you want in a guide is a stainless steel guide, so that you don't develop rust. I will show you here in a minute. I have some rods that have rusted out. And then I only use ceramic or zirconium inserts. The aluminum oxide inserts will also rust, and braid under high drag settings can actually cut into that material. So I only use a ceramic, like a Fuji insert, or a zirconium insert. So those are the 3 component features of a rod that I look for: the soft tip, the material of the guide. Again, I recommend paying for a stainless steel guide, and then paying for the either ceramic or zirconium insert. Now, I have had a few rods disappoint me. The first is a Tikka. I bought this Tikka a couple years ago, and it just kind of fell apart on me. The butt fell off and is lost forever. I don't like having this first guide be this big. I find that it actually inhibits casting, and this rod tip just actually isn't all that sensitive. It's pretty stiff, and this is just this is a medium rod here. This rod tip is pretty stiff, and so the problem with that is that it'll pull the weight out of the sand when a wave comes and pushes your line, instead of bending and letting the weight stay in place when that wave comes up over your line. So I don't recommend Tikka. I'm sure they make nice rods, but the one that I bought, which was this Dolphin surf rod, I'm not very impressed with this rod. The second rod that I bought that I don't like is the Penn Squadron. This is the rod that I learned the lesson on components about. It is rusting all over the place. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this, but there is rust on every single one of these guides, which is just annoying because even with me rinsing off everything after every single trip, it still rusts. These are also aluminum oxide inserts, and again, you're probably not going to be able to see it that well here, but these inserts have cuts in them from braid under high drag pressure, and they are also all oxidized. There's that green oxidation. I don't know the right term, but they have that gnarly green stuff all over them, because that aluminum it's not like rusting, but it's oxidizing. So I would recommend, if you're going to buy a surf rod, go ahead and paying a little extra to get up out of the class of rod that is going to have aluminum parts instead of stainless steel and ceramic or zirconium. You want that stainless steel guide and a ceramic or zirconium insert. And with a lot of the manufacturers, that's going to put you into more of the 150 to 200 price range. Okuma is a manufacturer where you can get them still in the like 110 to 120 range. Fish as hard as I do, your rods break, which is why I run the Okumas, because they aren't quite as expensive. Now, if you are looking for a heavier setup, I recommend the Penn Spinfisher Live Liner in an 8500. Again, I like the Live Liner just because you can easily have a light drag setting in the Sandspike that then becomes a heavy drag setting once you click the Live Liner up. And I have this paired with a Shimano Speedmaster 12-foot heavy rod. I really like this rod. It looks really sleek with the diamond wrap, and it has a ton of backbone and has brought in some really heavy fish for me. Reel holds 700 yards of 40-pound braid. The reel puts out 40 pounds of drag, which, if you aren't familiar with drag settings, 40 pounds of drag is a ton of drag. It's tiring to hold on to the rod with that much drag pressure. So again, if you're looking for a heavier setup, this is one that I highly recommend. You could also go with the Penn Carnage 3 in the 12-foot heavy. I like that rod as well. But my go-to would be the Shimano Speedmaster in a 12-foot heavy. It has great components. It has great backbone. It's a really well-made rod. I think you can pick it up at Bass Pro. You can also pick it up off of Amazon. When throwing lures in the surf, I have two different setups that I reach for when I am doing that. The first is this St. Croix Triumph 10-foot medium rod paired with a Daiwa BG-MQ 6000. I use this when I'm throwing bigger lures for bigger fish. In the surf here in South Carolina, when you throw bigger lures, you do have a pretty good chance of picking up a shark, particularly if you're throwing topwater. When you throw a big topwater in the surf, it tends to get sharked. So I tend to run a little piece of wire on that lure and run a little bit heavier gear just so I can pretty easily land those sharks and not have to worry about getting spooled. Throwing metals in the surf, the rod that I reach for is actually my favorite rod and reel combo that I've ever used. This is the St. Croix Mojo Inshore. This is a 7'6" medium power fast action rod. If you ever see this the purple version of this is the older version, the purple one, not the green one. The newer green one tends to be a little bit more flimsy. But if you ever see one of these on Facebook Marketplace, scoop it up. This is an amazing rod. I don't know why they changed it when they went to the newer version with the green, but the green version of this isn't as good. And then I have this paired with the Penn Clash 2. This is a 3000 series reel, and it is the high speed series. I love the high speed version for throwing metals because you want a faster retrieve, so having the faster line pickup is nice. I also tend to fish a lot of finesse fishing, Ned rig with the TRD on it, and you put a lot of slack in your line when you do that, and I like being able to pick up that line quickly. So this is my favorite setup ever. Again, it is the St. Croix Mojo Inshore, the older purple version, with a Penn Clash 2 high speed. All right, let's talk surf fishing weights. First, I'm going to talk about the weights to not use, just so you know what not to buy, and then I'm going to talk to you about the weights that I actually do use. First up is these disc weights. I don't know why these exist. They suck. Don't buy them. Don't use them. I don't even know what the application is for this. I think it's more actually for river fishing, when you want that weight to kind of get down and slide around a little bit. But in the surf, this is just going to slide over top of the sand. It doesn't settle into the sand as well as a pyramid weight. So I don't recommend ever buying these disc weights. Next up is the bank weight. This weight is going to roll around on the surf in any kind of current. It's also going to get pulled across the sand when a wave comes and pushes on your line. It's just going to pull this way and your line is going to go slack. And one of the cardinal sins of surf fishing is having a slack line. You want to keep your line tight against that weight and having a little bend in your rod so that you can see the bite. Next up, we have an egg weight. This is for like a Carolina rig. This is completely useless rig in the surf in South Carolina. There's almost always some kind of current, which is going to just push this into the shore. It's going to push you. It's just your rig is just going to come right back into the very shallow surf. This is very pointless to use in the surf unless you are casting near some kind of structure. Like we have some groins, which are man-made structures that hold sand in place. If you're casting right up against there and you want to drag a live bait across that, trying to pick up flounder, that would be really the only time to use this in the surf. If you are set rig fishing, you do not want to use an egg weight. The split shot, same thing. This just adds weight to your line. It's not going to actually do anything in terms of holding weight down. Don't use a split shot. So the weights that I actually use, I keep it simple. I use two types of weights, and I use two weights of weights. I use 3 ounces and I use 8 ounces. My go-to weight is a 3-ounce pyramid weight. This is what I use on all of my casting rigs when there isn't a whole lot of current. I have simplified things. I used to carry multiple weights, and I would like try and use lighter weights when the surf was really calm. And then I don't know, I have found that it's easier just to use a 3-ounce pyramid weight. It'll hold in most surf conditions. If this isn't holding, I go right to a 3-ounce Spudnik weight. What my experience with Spudnik weights has been is that you don't actually need more weight. It's the wires that do the holding, not the weight of the weight of the weight. And so I only throw 3-ounce Spudnik weights because 3 ounces is easy to throw on the rods that I'm using. Anything heavier than this, it gets a little bit harder to throw, like once you get up to like 5 ounces. But again, if a 3-ounce Spudnik is not holding in the surf, go home. You're not going to have a good day fishing. You're not. If a 3-ounce Spudnik weight isn't holding bottom for you, go home. Now, when it comes to Spudnik weights, I buy these weights off of Amazon. I'll link I'll have a link to them. And the reason I like these weights is because they click into a little slot that's here on the weight. There's a little slot, hopefully you can see that, that the wire clicks into. They do not have these stupid beads on them. These beads always fall off, and then the weight doesn't work because it doesn't click up properly. Don't buy these. They suck. These are the most commonly sold Sputnik weights, and they're really annoying. I hate these beads. I would highly suggest buying your Sputnik weights off of Amazon, because I've never seen this in a store. And getting the ones that just have the little slit in the side that the wire clicks into, as opposed to the ones with the beads. So for casting in the surf, I use two different types of weights. I use a 3-ounce pyramid weight and a 3-ounce Sputnik weight. I don't use anything lighter than a 3-ounce pyramid weight, just because I want to hold bottom, and I don't find that using different weights has actually much advantage. So I just have simplified things to only buy and use 3-ounce pyramid weights. And again, if you are finding that a 3-ounce Sputnik weight isn't holding in current, you're just in for a very, very crummy fishing experience, and you might as well go home. Now, when deploying baits, I will typically run an 8-ounce pyramid weight. Now, when I say deploying baits, I mean kayaking or droning large baits off the beach. You need a heavier weight to hold in the bottom because you have more line picking up more current and getting more wind, because it's way farther out, and you have a bigger bait that's catching more drag in the current. So you need a bigger weight. My go-to, again, is an 8-ounce pyramid weight. I like this because if a small shark comes along and picks up a big bait that it can't swallow, I can swim with it for a little bit and then drop it, and this weight will settle back down into the sand, and you can reconnect with this weight. If I'm fishing in really heavy current, usually that means there's really heavy wind and I'm just not fishing. But there's that occasion where I have really heavy current without really heavy wind and I can fish it. And in that situation, I will run a spider weight. This is different than the Sputnik weight. The Sputnik weight, when you pull this up out of the sand, these wires are going to release, and then you can reel it in with relative ease. The problem with this is if a fish comes and picks the bait up and pops these wires off, it is then just going to roll around out there in the surf, and you have to reel it in and recast it. When you're deploying baits, that means you have to reel it in and redeploy it, which is a lot of work and battery life on the drone. So I don't use Sputnik weights in that situation. I use spider weights. This is where you're going to manually bend down these wires, and they are going to stay bent, which means this is really heavy and really hard to reel in because it's digging in to the sand the whole way that you reel it in, which sometimes that's 400, 500 meters when you're shark fishing. And you're having to put like 20 pounds of drag against this thing to get it in, which is ridiculous, but sometimes that's the situation you're in. And I will occasionally use these spider weights. But most of the time in South Carolina, if there is strong enough current to justify using a spider weight, it's not really going to be fishable conditions. There's going to be really strong wind, and there's going to be a really high surf. And so you shouldn't be deploying baits anyways, because your drone is going to get knocked out of the sky by the wind, or the swell is going to be so high that it's not actually safe to kayak really far out there. And you shouldn't be deploying baits in those conditions. I used to, but now I ask myself, what would Elizabeth do? And she would not do that. So those are weights. You really only need two. 3-ounce pyramid, 3-ounce Sputnik. That's all you need. If you run into a situation where you need more weight than this, or you think you need less weight than this, it's not worth the hassle of actually buying those extra weights and having them. Just buy these. That's all you need. 3-ounce pyramid, 3-ounce Sputnik. All right, let's talk fishing line. you are going to want to run braid on your surf fishing reels. The reason for that is the increased capacity and increased casting distance. I have run, gosh, probably 6 or 7 different types of braid. I've run Power Pro. I've run the Suffix 832. I have run Spider Wire. I've run the Cast King rope. That stuff is terrible. I've tried a bunch of different ones, and the ones that I landed on is the Suffix 832. 832 means it is 8 fibers with 32 weaves per inch. This stuff has been great for me. I get great casting distance. I get great breaking strength. I get great knots out of it. I don't get wind knots, which is a big consideration. The Power Pro V2 Super Slick is very prone to wind knots. Don't ever buy that. It is a horrible, horrible braid, and it's very expensive, but it's complete crap. I mean, it is complete crap. Do not buy Power Pro V2. It's terrible. You will end up with wind knots every time you go out. It's terrible. So the line that I run on almost all of my reels is this high vis yellow Suffix 832 in the 20 pound. Am I pointing at the right places? 20 pound. I try and keep things simple, and so I've converted everything. I try and keep things simple, so I've converted almost all of my reels to this braid right here, and so I can buy it in bulk and I can put it on my reels. As I go through braid, sometimes I'll lose a whole bunch of braid and need to respool or whatever. I'm replacing it with this. It's an excellent braid, and it is the one that I suggest you use. The reason for the high vis yellow is so that when you are running multiple lines in the water, you can see where you have casted before, so you don't cross yourself over. And it also helps people who walk underneath your lines, which is going to happen. You're going to be fishing with an outgoing tide, and you're going to set up right on the tide, and then the tide's going to go out. People are going to walk right in front of you underneath your lines. It helps them see it and not clothesline themselves. So I would run the high vis yellow, and I would run it in a 20 pound. Now I do run 40 pound or 80 pound on my shark rigs, 130 pound. I run much heavier braid when I'm shark fishing, but this is just, for a 44,000 or 4,500 series reel, I would put 20 pound on it. All right, let's talk hooks. I have used every brand, every type, every hook ever made, trying to solve the perfect hook dilemma. And there is no such thing as the perfect hook. You will miss strikes, you will miss fish, you will straighten hooks. The variety of fish that you can catch in the surf and how small of a bait a big fish will take means there is no perfect hook. But I do have a lot of experience using a bunch of different hooks, so I'm going to talk about the hooks that I like, the hooks that I don't like, and the reasons for that. So let's get into hooks stuff. Let's talk about hooks that I have moved away from. I have tried running trebles in the surf, particularly in the fall when there's tons of Spanish and bluefish around that are just biting my live baits in half. The problem with trebles is you end up gut hooking everything. You gut hook the Spanish, or gill hook the Spanish, you gut hook the blues, you gut hook redfish, you gut hook sharks. Treble hooks are highly effective at actually catching the fish, but they are terrible for the fish, and you'll end up killing fish that you don't actually want to kill. So I do not recommend ever using trebles in the surf, but that does mean, particularly if you're fishing in South Carolina in the fall, that you're going to get baits that get bit in half, or you're going to get strikes where you don't hook up on the fish because you're not running trebles for things like Spanish. I have also run J-hooks in the surf. J-hooks also tend to gut hook things. If you are actively fishing a live bait, I think the hook to go to is a J-hook. J hooks have their place in the world, but when you are set rig fishing, when you're putting your rod in a sand spike, don't use a J hook. You're going to gut hook the fish again. Just the same as a treble hook. It's not quite as bad as the treble, but you are going to gut hook fish with J hooks. So that leads me to circle hooks, which I have used every type of circle hook that is out there, pretty much. So the ones that I really like, let's talk about those. First, I used to be a huge proponent of Mustad. These are Mustad. Sorry, I don't think I have any. Oh, that's treble hooks. I don't think I have any Mustad circles that are still in the original bag, but this is a Mustad circle hook. It is not offset. They're good. They're fine hooks, but I've come across hooks that I like better. So I'm going to say that you can buy Mustad. You will catch fish with Mustad. I've caught plenty of fish with Mustad. They are well-made hooks, but I have found hooks that I like better. And so we are going to get into that. Oh, I guess let's also talk about Eagle Claw. These Eagle Claw hooks, this is a 13-aught. This is for sharks. These are also nice hooks. Again, nothing wrong with these hooks other than the fact that I've found hooks that I like better. But Eagle Claw does make some good circle hooks. So no real main complaints about it, just the fact that I have found better. So let's get into the hooks that I am actually using now, and the hooks that I would recommend that you use. We're gonna start small and then work our way into the bigger stuff. First up, we have hooks that I use to catch bait. This is just an Eagle Claw, plain shank, J hook, all purpose. So this is a size 8 hook. It's a tiny little hook, but these hooks are great at catching pinfish. Those pinfish that are like this big that make really great bait in the surf. Those pinfish send off a ton of vibration. They hate being hooked through the nose. And this little hook, this little size 8 hook, is a great way to fish for them. It's super easy. You just put a little piece of fish bites on there. You don't even need shrimp. Just put a little tiny piece of fish bites on this and throw it around any structure in a marsh environment and you will catch pinfish. I throw it around a bridge over here that has a ton of oysters and I can pull out 8-10 pinfish in, I don't know, 20 minutes. So next up is the hook that I use on the rigs that I run shrimp on. So I highly recommend these Owner Mutu Light circle hooks in a size 4. I did want to show you, this is the Mustad size 4 circle hook right here, and this is the Owner size 4 circle hook. It's a pretty big size difference between these two, even though they are both size 4, which when I say size 4, it is pound 4, not 4/0. That's a 4/aught. This is a size 4 hook. I believe that these have, so if you might not be able to get this correct here, but if you hold these up, the gap on these hooks here, if you see the gap between the wire and the hook point, is very similar. And that's what's going to get hooked around the side of the mouth of the fish there. But this hook is significantly less material than this hook. And the reason I like this hook is, one, because it's offset. That offset nature does help with the hookups. And because there's more material on here, you can get a little bit more bait and it's just a little bit easier to work with. All right, so next up are the hooks that I use for running live bait, mainly live bait, but sometimes smaller chunks of cut bait in the surf. Again, I'm running Owner Mutu Lights. They're just in different sizes. And I have moved away from using these 1/aughts, and I now only run the 3/aught hooks. When you run live bait in the surf in South Carolina, there is a very good chance that a shark is going to come pick it up, particularly in the really warm months, June, July, and August. There are so many fine-toothed sharks around that they pick up anything that they want to eat, and they are right there in the surf. I used to be of the mindset that you needed to match the size of your hook to the size of the bait that you were using. And so if I was running just a little 1-inch mud minnow, I'd use the 1/0. But now I'm exclusively using the 3/0 because I have straightened out a 1/0 hook on sharks before. I've done it twice now, 2 different sharks. I've straightened it out because you do have to apply some drag pressure to that fish to get it in. And with the amount of drag that you have to apply to a 4.5 foot shark to land it, it will straighten out the 1/0, but it will not straighten out the 3/0. And I have not noticed a difference in my ability to catch fish with a larger hook through the nose of a smaller bait. The fish are still picking up that small bait with the larger wire running through that bait. Now for bigger live baits and bigger chunks of cut bait, I have actually moved to this VMC Nemesis Circle offset hook. This is honestly my favorite circle hook that I've come across. It's, hopefully I'm saying this right, vanadium steel. It doesn't rust very easily. It's super strong. I've never straightened one of these out. I've caught like a, I don't know, probably 7.5 foot shark on this with a ton of drag. It was probably 30 plus pounds of drag on that fish, and it did not straighten out. And these things have a great hookup rate. They are expensive, but they last a long time. I get them from Bass Pros. They're almost twice as expensive on Amazon as they are at Bass Pro. But this is my go-to circle hook for bigger live baits and bigger chunks of cut bait. Is this VMC Nemesis Circle in the offset version. Here in South Carolina, we can run offset hooks. If you're somewhere else, make sure that offset hooks are legal to run. I run this in the 10/0 version. So this is, I mainly catch sharks on this. I've caught some big reds on this as well. I caught a big 44-inch red on one of these hooks a while ago. This is not a huge hook for a big red. Big reds have really big mouths. I also really like just the 7/0 version of the Owner Mutu Light circle hook. This wire is much thicker than this wire, which is why I've moved away from the Mutu Light circle hooks and started using these vanadium steel hooks, because these are just super, super strong hooks. It's a thicker wire, but it's a big enough gap there that you can catch a really big fish on it. So I really like these hooks. And now, finally, I've got a true big shark hook here. This is the Catch-All forged, I guess Catch-All commercially forged hooks here. I haven't mashed down these barbs yet, but I always mash down the barbs on my shark rigs. This is a big hook. I mean, you can see that's my hand. This is an 18/0. I actually prefer the 20/0s, but they were sold out when I needed hooks, so I bought 18s. And I mean, this hook, you're not gonna straighten this hook out. It'll catch as big a shark as you need it to catch. These are great hooks. Again, if you are looking to get into shark fishing and you need a really big sturdy hook, the Catch-All commercially forged hooks are excellent hooks for that purpose. All right, final step, rigging. On the baits that I'm casting out, I run 2 rigs. I run a rig with a size 4 circle hook, which I will show you how to tie here in a second. And I run a rig with a 3/0 circle hook, which again, I will show you how to tie it here in a second. What you will need is some monofilament line. This is Berkley Big Game. I get it at Walmart. It's super cheap, but it has served me very well. I run 20 pound and 50 or 60 pound. This happens to be 60 pound. You will need the hooks, size 4 circle hooks, 3/0 hook, some floats. I did another video on how to make these metallic floats. I really like the metallic reflection in the surf. I do feel like I catch more fish, although it's probably just in my head, but I like them. And then I run a little piece of wire. This is a knottable wire. It is the Surflon Micro Supreme 7x7. Don't buy the 1x7. That is not a knottable wire. You'll need crimps for that. But the 7x7 wire in the 40 pound is a very knottable wire, meaning I can tie knots with it, which we will see me do here in a minute. All right, so first up, the shrimp rig that I run. I call it a shrimp rig. It's really a triple drop pompano rig, but it's just the rig that I run shrimp on. Again, you're gonna need some 20-pound mono, and you're gonna need a piece that is about your arm's width. I'm 6 feet tall, so it's about 6 feet long. And the first thing you're gonna do is get a piece that is probably, I don't know, 12 inches or so. And you're just gonna tie 2 overhand knots, overhand half hitch, whatever these are called, right here in the bottom. And you're gonna leave that tag end. I like to get it wet. I don't think that actually does anything, but I'm gonna do that. And then on this tag end here, so this is where your weight is gonna go. You're just gonna slide this loop through the weight and bring it around, and then your weight will be right there. And then your first hook is gonna be on this tag end right here. So we're gonna take a float and throw it on there. And then you're gonna take your hook and toss it through here. And I like to tie a polymer knot. So you bring it through once, and then you're actually gonna come through again, just like that. Ah, wind is making it difficult on me here. Hopefully I'll be able to edit out the sound of the wind. So you have it just like that. It's gone through twice. You're gonna tie again an overhand knot. And then you're gonna, so you have an overhand knot just like that. And then you're gonna bring the hook through this loop here. And I like to kind of hold this extra loop up, and you're gonna pull that tight, just like that. That's a polymer knot, just like that. That is the strongest fishing knot. Actually, it is the strongest fishing knot. And you can cut that tag in nice and close, and you have one hook already attached to your rig. Then I'm gonna come up probably, I don't know, a foot or so, and we're just gonna do another loop with 4 overhand knots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wet it, tighten it down. You don't want this loop to be super long. The longer this loop is, the more likely it is to get all tangled up and stuff. I like it to be, I don't know, what is this, 6 inches? So we're going to run it through. Sorry, let me explain what I'm doing before I put it in between my teeth. I'm gonna run this through my front teeth right here to put a little point on this. And that's so that I can then run it through the bead and the hook. So I've got a little point there. And I'm just gonna push it through my float. I called it a bead, it's a float. And then I'm gonna push it through my hook. And the eye of this hook is pretty small, so it can be a little tricky sometimes getting this through. But you can do it. Here we go. And then my other float from the ground. All right, so we have 2. Now we're gonna come up again and add our 3rd hook. And I do feel like I catch more fish with more baits in the water. They are so prone to getting stolen that I like to have multiple baits out there just because they get stolen. So the more baits, the more likely chance you have to actually hook up on the fish versus just having your bait stolen and fishing empty hooks. So again, I'm going to tie those 4 overhand knots, and then we're going to come down, put a little point on the loop there, send it through, and put our hook on. Just like that. Then I'm going to use a FG knot to attach this to my line. I don't use swivels because I fish with a lot of inexperienced clients that tend to reel it all the way up into the eye of my guides, and the swivel will damage my rods. So I use an FG knot, and it'll end up just, they'll reel it up to this first float, which doesn't damage my rod, which is fine. We then just pull it back out. I will show you how to tie an FG knot here in a minute so that you know how to actually fully get this attached to the rod. But first, let's tie the live bait rig. But I wanted to show you your rig isn't going to sit in the water like this. It's going to sit in the water like this. You know, you're going to have it casted out, and it's going to kind of sit like this. So this is essentially a bottom fishing rig. And you're just going to have 3 baits that are pretty close to the bottom, because this is how it's going to sit in the water, just like that. All right, live bait rig. Again, 60-pound Trilene big game. This is cheap mono, but it has served me well. I don't have any complaints about it. You can pick up a spool of 235 yards for like $10 at Walmart. So for this, when you throw live bait in the surf in South Carolina, there's a really good chance that it's going to get sharked. And if you don't have a piece of mono that is fairly thick and longer than the shark, that shark is going to break you off. It will tail whip the braid and break the braid, or the braid will rub up against the shark and it'll snap. There is no such thing as abrasion resistant braid. Any manufacturer that claims that, I challenge them to come shark fishing with me, and I will prove them wrong. Sharks will instantly snap braid. So if you want to actually land the sharks that come and eat your baits, run a long piece of mono. So we're going to do probably, this is going to be more like 10 to 12 feet. And I'm going to cut that. And then same thing, I keep it simple. We're going to come down, we're going to get a piece of about foot long tag end here, and you're going to tie 2 overhand knots right here. And you want to make sure that you have that this loop is long enough to get a Sputnik weight through. And then from here, you're going to take a piece of this Surflon Micro Supreme wire here. I'm going to run probably, I don't know, 18 inches to 2 feet. I don't know how long that is. That's probably closer to 2 feet. Cut that. These scissors have a flat spot right here where I can put that wire up against and cut it. Normal scissors, you're going to have a hard time cutting this wire, which is kind of the point of the wire. So you might need a pair of pliers that has some wire cutters on them. And then, where'd my mono go? Now we are just going to use a double uni to tie these 2 together. And I want my bait to be close to my weight. So I'm gonna tie this knot pretty close to the other knot. Just because I don't want a ton of space in between my weight and the bait, because if there's a ton of space in between the bait and your weight, it tends to helicopter in the air when you cast it, and you don't get as good a casting distance. All right, so a double uni. So you're gonna bring the wire along the mono, and you're gonna create a loop. Hopefully you're gonna be able to see this here. So I've got my loop running along the mono here. And then I'm just gonna send it through 4 times. 1, 2, 3. I'm sending it around both the wire and the mono. 3, 4. So I've got 4 wraps there. And now here's an important piece of this. You're gonna pull that somewhat tight, but not all the way tight. You're gonna, because this tag end is so short, I have a hard time gripping it, so I bite it. And I pull that pretty tight. If you don't pull that tight, this last loop tends to open up when you pull it tight, and you can end up with a bad knot. So you pull this pretty tight, and then you're gonna tie that exact same knot right here. It's called a double uni because it's 2 uni knots. So mono running with the wire, and you got a loop, and you're coming through that loop. 1, 2, 3. Sorry if you can't see what I'm doing here, but I'll show you when I'm done. 4. So I've got now the same knot. I've got a loop of the mono, and I've wrapped it 4 times. We're gonna pull that tight. There. And same thing. Pull that pretty tight. And then you're gonna pull both tag ends. And that's gonna cinch that down. And you can see right here on that mono, I have this loose loop here. So I'm gonna, before I really pull this down, I'm gonna tighten that. And then I'm gonna really pull, and that's gonna tighten down. And you have a double uni right there. You can cut these tag ends, and this is a really strong knot. I honestly, what's more likely to happen is this wire is going to get frayed by the shark, and you're going to break down here somewhere on this wire, as opposed to breaking at this knot. Just because this is only 40-pound wire. It gives you a shot at landing the sharks. I land most sharks with this wire. But that's how I connect the wire to the mono. And then we're just gonna throw our hook on here. Again, we're gonna tie a polymer knot. So we're gonna come through once, come back again, come through twice, tie our overhand knot right there, come through, pull that somewhat tight. And with this, you absolutely want to get this wet. It's a knottable wire, but it still doesn't pull tight great. So you want to get that pretty wet so that you can get that cinched down real good and pull that real tight. There we go. And then cut this tag end. Just like that. And the logic behind the length of this wire here. Again, when you're casting, you want the weight and the bait to be fairly close together so that when you cast, it just kind of flies through the air like this and you don't get the helicopter effect. If you get the helicopter effect, it's not going to go very far. But this wire needs to be longer than the width of the mouth of the shark, because you might hook the shark on the left side of its mouth, and this, you're pulling like this, and then that shark turns like this, and the wire is then coming across its mouth like this because it's hooked over here, and it's biting down on that wire because it's coming across its mouth. Sharks tend to swim back and forth, particularly in the process of landing them. When they're right in the surf, they swim back and forth, and so that wire is going to come across its mouth, and you need it to be wider than the shark's mouth, because if the shark gets this part, if it gets the mono in its mouth, it's gonna go right through it. Even a heavy mono, those shark's teeth are really, really sharp. Trust me, they are very, very sharp. I just barely skimmed the shark's teeth, and it really got my finger pretty good. So this is my live bait and small chunk of cut bait rig. This will land fine tooth sharks. This will land Atlantic sharp-nosed sharks. This will land the black-nosed sharks. You're going to have a hard time landing a black tip or a spinner on this. This wire just isn't quite thick enough for them. I have done it before. I've landed smaller ones, but a bigger, like a 60, 70 pound black tip is probably going to bite through this wire. But the wire's thin enough that we caught a 26-inch Spanish on this rig just this week. So a Spanish is a very, very sight motivated fish. And so this wire is thin enough that it didn't deter that Spanish from taking the bait. So that's why I run this, because I'm not necessarily targeting sharks with this. I'm just targeting whatever will eat a live bait in the surf. It just happens that in the summer in South Carolina, a lot of times that is sharks. So I run the wire to give me a chance at least landing those sharks. Now, one thing you can't do is grab this wire and drag the shark across the sand with the wire. You'll probably break the wire just because it will get somewhat frayed and lose some strength. So once you get the shark into the surf, you need to tail grab the shark. And if it's a fine tooth shark, it's going to freak out when you touch it. Just firm grip and grab the base of the tail and then the top of the tail, and you hold on and let it wiggle, and it's gonna wiggle free. So you're gonna have to grab it a few times, but that's just the nature of those fine tooth sharks. All right, let's show you all how to tie an FG knot, and then we're done with this tutorial.
All right, so tying an FG knot is a skill that is actually somewhat difficult, so don't feel bad if you tie a few bad knots the first couple tries. I do suggest practicing and giving it a couple dry runs before you actually get this knot wet. So the first part of the process is taking your main braided line here, and you are going to wrap it around your pinky finger. Actually, I guess the first step in the process is you need tension on this main braided line. When you're out on the beach, I just put it in the sand spike and get tension for it that way. When I'm at home, you can see I lean it up against the table here. So I've got some tension on this main braided line, and I'm just going to come lay my mono over top of it, and I'm going to start doing wraps. So I'm going to come down and around with that mono and come towards me and pull that tight. It's important to pull that good and tight. And then I'm going to do a wrap away from me and pull that tight. And then we're going to repeat that process. So that's 2 wraps, 3, 4, 5. Oops, I missed. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now I've tied this knot so many times that I can actually do it without looking. I can do it in the dark. And your fingers will eventually have that muscle memory. But so I did 20 wraps, And now I'm pinching it like this, and I'm going to do a half hitch here. And I'm going to come down and pull that somewhat tight. That's just to hold those wraps in place. And then let's see if I can do this here. I'm going to wrap my hand around it like this. Wrap my hand around it like this. And I'm going to pull that tight. And I'm going to really, like, it's going to hurt my hand. I'm going to dig this into my hand here. And I'm going to push as hard as I can with my thumbs. And I'm going to pull that as tight as I can without the braid cutting my hand. And what that does is that digs the braid into the mono. And if we were to take this knot off right now, you would see dig marks in the mono. Now I'm going to finish by going under, over, under, over. That creates kind of a figure 8 in that knot right there. And we're going to cut that. And this next piece is extremely important. Mono stretches here. And so you actually do want to leave just a little bit of mono tag end right here. You are going to hear that clicking through your guides. See, there's just, maybe it's easier to see like that. See like that. There's a little bit of mono tag in there. What I have found is the most common reason that this knot fails is this tag end actually slips below the wraps there. And once it does that, it then just pulls free. And so once you have that there, you can then give it some test pulls here and see if it's holding, see if that mono is going to stretch below the wraps. This one is good. It didn't stretch below the wraps under some pretty heavy pressure there. So I have successfully tied my FG knot there. This is the knot that I use to attach mono to braid in pretty much every situation. And now, if I cut this tag in too close, I bet I can get this to pull through. So let's go ahead and come in and cut this as close as we can, just like that. And I bet, let's see, maybe not. Now, if this went through the guides a couple of times, yep. Maybe not. Maybe I tied a really good knot. Nope, there it goes. So just by pulling on it, you can see it's starting to unravel and undo itself. You send this through the guides a couple of times, it's going to do that, and it's going to pop free. So that is why. So you can see the wraps there. You can see how that's all distorted there. But if you cut that tag end too close, it is just going to pull through the wraps. So you do need a little bit of mono tag in there so that it doesn't do what I just accomplished. I forgot that I said I was going to talk about bait. Let's talk about bait really fast. 3 types of bait: shrimp, live bait, cut bait. That's all you really need if you're just casually fishing in the surf. For shrimp, I always run fish bites with my shrimp. I will run a piece of fish bites that's about the size of my fingernail, and then I will tip that with 1 section of shrimp. So I get about 6 baits out of 1 shrimp. And so I will run doesn't matter what flavor of fish bites, I will run a piece of fish bites and then a small piece of shrimp on the size 4 circle hook. And then for live bait, if you have access to live bait, that is a little bit better than cut bait. But know that live bait does tend to have a tendency to get bit in half. And if that keeps happening to you, you can switch over to cut bait and use a smaller chunk. When it comes to live bait, I really like mud minnows and mullet. I also like pinfish. I hate menhaden. I can't keep menhaden alive.
I have a big cattle watering trough that I fill with salt water that I keep bait alive in, and menhaden do not stay alive in there. They make the water really gross and then they die, and that makes the water even grosser. So I pretty much only exclusively use mullet and pinfish and mud minnows. Mud minnows are especially tough. They will stay alive forever. I don't know what it is about those fish, but they stay alive in low oxygen water and they stay alive in really hot water. They're an excellent bait if you don't have a great option for keeping bait alive. That's going to be your best bet. And then cut bait, honestly, if you don't have access to live bait, using just a piece of pinfish or whiting or spot or something like that you catch out of the surf on the shrimp, you can catch it, cut it up, use a piece that's, an inch by an inch. It doesn't need to be very big, and throw that back out there, and you can catch reds, you can catch bluefish, you can catch sharks, you can catch jacks, you can catch all kinds of stuff on cut bait. All right, I hope this is helpful. I hope you are now able to get fully geared up for the surf and go out there and have more success than you were having. Take care.